everyone, and welcome to the Weekly Marketer Podcast. Every single week, we interview deep dive experts in one of the many fields of marketing to drop huge knowledge bombs from the best of the best and teach you how to take your marketing skills to the next level. This is episode 18, and I'm sitting with Hector Simoudis, who's CEO of VP Legacies. Hector is first-generation Greek-American. He grew up in an American compound in Saudi Arabia and has been to over 39 countries where he found his passion for entrepreneurship and people. His first venture was at 13 years old when he started an American candy shop in Saudi Arabia. More recently, he founded VP Legacies with his business partner, Johnny Havey, in 2015, where he works with clients like Dish Network, Optiv, Home Advisor, and other companies of all shapes and sizes, helping them to create communication strategies to clients, customers, and employees to increase their retention. Hector, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me today, Jeremy. I'm super excited.
All right, let's just start off with 39 countries. That's a lot. That's like a good 20% of the world, isn't it, or something?
Yeah, that's one of the biggest blessings I had growing up. It's an absolute pleasure and privilege to have visited to over 39 countries around the world. I've seen a lot growing up from, when you look at economic status from the richest of the rich all the way to the most developing countries as well. And that really opens up your mind and really allows you to see the world in different lenses and perspectives. And it really shaped me growing up. And, honestly, Jeremy, that's why I really found and discovered my love for people, my love for business, my love for community, for relationships.
That's incredible. That's really cool. So, I think that's actually a huge thing, getting that kind of perspective, especially being in the marketing world, right? Where we all day, every day are trying to reach just lots of different kinds of people for lots of different kinds of companies. Has that kind of background and such been a big advantage for you?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a huge advantage, because especially now since we live in this world, this globalized world where we work with people and have clients from all different countries, all different cultural backgrounds, being able to communicate with them and connect with them in a way that this travel has allowed me to. When I meet individuals from Eastern Asia, or if I meet individuals, I'll share a quick story that happened yesterday. I met this fantastic entrepreneur in downtown Denver, just recently moved here. And, I introduced myself and he introduces himself to me and he says, "Hi, my name's Mohammed." And I go, "Hi, nice to meet you, Mohammed." And he's like, "Mohammed, do you speak Arabic? How are you saying that accent?"
Yeah.
It was just that little detail that allowed me to connect with them in a really, really nice, amazing way. And I was able to share my story and he shared his story and we immediately connected, exchanged phone numbers, and we'll hopefully be getting together here soon. So that travel and, being able to meet other people from different cultural backgrounds has allowed me to also create these fantastic personal connections and conversation starters with different people of all walks of life. And I couldn't have done that without traveling and continuous traveling as well. But I don't want that to be discouraging, right? I don't want people to say, "Well, I haven't traveled to that many countries or whatnot." You can, of course, still connect. You can, of course, still build phenomenal relationships. But going to the question of how has that impacted marketing? How has that impacted, what you do your day-to-day at VP Legacies? As the CEO of VP Legacies, a big part of my job is to make and build new relationships, strategic partnerships, and of course, having that travel and that experience has allowed me to share stories and connect with people in certain ways that without the travel, I wouldn't have been able to share some of those very intimate and amazing details with them.
That's super cool. Well, I think that obvious that, your kind of upbringing and the kind of diverse people and experiences and things like that you've met has definitely led you in the direction that you're going. But let's take a kind of a step back and say, how'd your kind of career get started? How'd you get to being the CEO of an ad agency today? What was that first step in your journey?
Great question. So I will like to share a story. When I was growing up, as you know, I traveled a lot and there were a couple of countries that I visited that have always stuck. And, this story that I'm about to share is one that I've shared on stage before. I was in Vietnam, in Hanoi, and I was with my family, and we were walking down this main street. And in Vietnam, there's a lot of street vendors selling different products and services to the individuals and people walking by. And I come across these three amazing women. They must have been in their, 60s to 70s. And what they were selling, Jeremy, was these hats that were made out of beer cans. They would take Heineken and Amstel beer cans and they cut them out and they wired them together with wire. And here I am, and I'm looking at these three amazing women, and how much are they making a day? How much are they making? Maybe $1, maybe a little bit more, maybe even less. They were so happy. They were laughing. They were smiling. When we walked by, they didn't speak English, but they came out and they gave us hugs and they, tried to say hello, and we communicated and, through body language and whatnot. It was an absolutely amazing experience. And the reason why I say that is because what led me to VP Legacies and creating this company with Johnny is that we saw that in a world where the most beautiful thing in life are relationships, when it comes to the business world, we see that there is a lot of disconnect. We've come across companies, maybe some of us have been a part of companies where that trust is lacking, that overall satisfaction is down. And what that comes down to is relationships. And when you really dig into the why of what's happening internally to an organization, it's about how transparent are those relationships? How trustful are those relationships?
So what was your first kind of step into the marketing world though? How'd you get started with that? What was like that first like job or role or client? How'd that happen?
So rewinding the clock back to 2015, I remember when we got our first client. Our first client, this was, very beginning. I think this was even before we filed with the Colorado Secretary of State VP Legacies, trying to figure out the name still. But we had the beautiful opportunity to work with an amazing gentleman, and his name was Dino, and he was a CPA. He came up to Johnny and I, and he said, "Hey, I'm a CPA," and another big reason why we connected with him is another what we call a secret talent of Johnny is he's a CPA as well. So they were able to connect on that level, and he looked at us and he said, "Hey, you guys are young. We were in our really early 20s at the time, and you guys are young. You guys are trying. I would love to, get you involved with what I'm doing. I'm on my own. I don't have a solid website yet. I'm starting to build it. I don't have a logo. I don't, have visual communication tools like video or photo. Can you guys help me out?" And of course, we were like, "Absolutely, let's definitely do that." We're so excited. That's when we had the chance to sit down and really start developing his logo and his materials and different things like that. And Johnny and I, we were just so proud. We were so proud because that was the first time an individual and his company trusted us to come in, these young entrepreneurs to, look at everything and figure out how can we help him better communicate who he is, his value, the pains that he solves for his clients through the communication tools that we deployed, from the website to the videos to the other forms of communication. And that was a phenomenal project we'll never forget.
That's wonderful. So Dino, the CPA, that kind of like really kicked it off. And it sounds like, did you intend to go into this business thinking like, okay, we're going to do full branding packages and everything? Was it kind of more like, what did you kind of think it was going to be at first?
Yeah, honestly, so the story kind of goes back to Johnny and I when we were in college at the University of Denver. So Johnny and I, we've always had this amazing passion for entrepreneurship as soon as we met in college. And, when we were about juniors in college, Johnny actually started this company called Vliz, all about how to capture a story through visual communication. And then also in senior year, when I decided to take that entrepreneurial route and just dive right into it out of college, I first really wanted to focus on trying to develop a mobile application that would connect local small mom and pop shops to individuals through the art of storytelling. all of us have our regular spot. We all have our regular coffee shop or our regular lunch spot that we go and we know the owner. And what we wanted to do through this platform is through storytelling, being able to connect individuals, by helping them find their regular place. That's kind of, where it really started. Moving into where we are now, that's when Johnny and I said, what are we doing? What are we really doing here? What is this world? What's our why? What's our purpose? And it finally clicked. And what clicked was what we discovered, what our why is, what our purpose is we want to create a world where people aren't afraid to personally connect. And our big tagline as well is people matter. That's it. People matter. And we understand that we live in a world today of powerful visual communication. And you know what, Jeremy? This is what I tell everybody. It doesn't matter if you're Microsoft or if you are a startup that just filed for business today. You both have the same thing in common, which is this. Business is two things. It's your relationships that you have with your customers and the relationships that you have with your employees. That's it. You can't have a business without having relationships with your employees and your customers. That's business right there. And everything always comes back to whether we're a business trying to grow, whether we're having growth pains, whether we are, whether we're having challenges or issues internally or externally to the organization. I guarantee you, if we keep digging to find the core reason to why that challenge is happening, or how are we going to achieve this new goal that we've implemented, it always comes down to the relationship with the customer or the relationship with the employee. And how are we going to communicate better? How are we going to build a better, more sophisticated, more personal connection with the customers and employees part of our company in order for us to achieve our goals or overcome our challenges? And that's why we focus on communication and bringing people together.
So that's you brought up a bunch of interesting points, which I really liked. One of which is communicating through like these visual story elements and things like that. And then, kind of communication being at the core of business, which I completely agree with. Obviously, as a professional talker, granted through like Facebook ads, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, okay, the state of the union of communications, right? We're getting bombarded with more ads every day than we ever have, right? And we're getting more messages and social media is blowing up our phone. It's information overload out there. So, you talk about visual mediums, you talk about communication, things like that. What is like the state of communication today in 2019, and how do you see like effective strategies to be a good communicator? In the past, where you couldn't reach people, now everyone's reaching everyone all the time. Kind of how do you feel about that?
Sure, that's a great question. I mean, that is a question I love, and I get so excited to answer all the time. I just got shivers, literally.
You might want to turn up the heat, man. I think I saw.
Yeah, I know, right? Well, I'll go ahead and jump into it, Jeremy, and you're totally right. We live in this world today where we're constantly being communicated to, whether if it's through mobile advertisements, text messages, phone calls, Facebook ads, social media. There are so many forms of communication. And this is what we like when we whiteboard with our clients. This is a little diagram we always like to draw, and I'll try to draw it here for you with just a voice, if you will. Basically, I want you to think of your company, right? You have your HR department, your human resources, you have your marketing, you have your branding, you have your PR, you have your media, you also have IT, you have all of these departments. And remember, what are these departments trying to do? These departments are trying to enhance those two relationships that we talked about, the relationships with the customers and relationships with the employees. Every single department is utilizing the same form of communication methods. The HR department is using video, the marketing department is using photos and videos, and the IT is trying to communicate via email or newsletters. Everybody is utilizing all of these powerful tools. But we're starting to discover, Jeremy, in this world of a bunch of communication and communication methods as well, is when we go in, it's not that the tools that they're using are not powerful. What we try to look at is, let's analyze your strategy Because when we find companies that are struggling with employee engagement or struggling with customer engagement, they want to take their revenues to the next level, or they want to decrease that attrition rate and really retain powerful employees that are there for the long run. It comes down to that communication style and what communication tools they're utilizing in order to communicate with them effectively. But to answer that question of how do you know what is the right tools to use, it's all about creating a strategy, understanding your customer or your employee. But when I say understanding them, I'm not talking about in the traditional sense as far as how old they are and the typical demographics. Those are powerful. We need to know the demographics to understand where are we going to place and distribute and deploy our communication content. And it also allows us to understand what form of communication content do they like interacting with? Do they like interacting with email? Do they like interacting with video? Do they like interacting with photo? Because one thing that we found is, why are we creating a video if the audience that we're trying to impact likes to read emails and communicates better with emails? The most important thing is identifying the emotional profile. The emotional profile. And the reason why I say that is because what does emotion do? And this is scientifically proven as well. Emotion produces action, and action leads to results. Understand your audience, understand the person or the individuals that will be driving the business objective that you've outlined for your company, understand their emotional profile, then you know how to communicate with them in a way in which that ignites the right emotions, that produces the right actions, that gets to the result. And the issue that we find, Jeremy, to go back to that question of all the bombardment with different forms of communication, is what is your strategy? And what we found is that a lot of people's strategies is what we call the winged strategy. The strategy of people coming into the office and saying, well, what are we going to do today, guys? What sounds good? Well, let's create that. Maybe let's do that. Let's shoot this out and see what happens. No.
It's like the panic strategy, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I've noticed this a lot of times, and I don't want to say it's true every time, but we're in similar businesses, right? I notice that when somebody goes out and every day is something new, it's because nothing is working. And because nothing's working, as like the marketer or whatever department they're in charge of or whatever, it's that they want to go and they want to say, okay, well, I'm going to get fired because nothing's working. So the next best thing that what I can do is to go and just throw 100 things at the wall. So at least it looks like I'm doing a lot of stuff. So then they can't fire me. You know what I'm saying? Is like, I don't know what it is, but it is. It's like a panic strategy, right? And it's like, it's playing defense largely, which seems weird. It's counterintuitive because you're doing a lot and you're like, they're not playing defense. They're getting out there. But like, no, they are, because they don't believe in their strategy. So they're playing defense by just sandbagging as much crap as they can. Is that like kind of fair? Do you think that's like the way that like you're seeing things? I don't know.
Absolutely. I love how you described it as far as this panic, this defensive mode. Like, oh my gosh, we're trying to hit our, Q2 or Q3 goals. This ain't happening. We got employees leaving left and right, so let's just deploy this, let's deploy that and see what happens. And let me tell you something that's really interesting that goes into personal connection and communication, Jeremy. We live in this world today of technology, and I'm not saying let's go back to the newspaper. No. Technology is powerful. It has allowed us to do so many things. However, we have to understand the strengths of technology and also the things that we need to work on with technology as well. But what has technology done that has kind of, I don't know, maybe for a lack of better terms, cultivated a habit? And that's the habit of instant gratification. We want it now. I don't know the answer to this. I go on to Google, boom, I put it in, and the answer comes out now. I want the data in 30 seconds. I want this, I want that right now. But what is the one thing, Jeremy, the one thing that takes time? Relationships. Prospecting, developing relationships. That's what you're doing. And yes, is there technology that allows us to get into contact and start cultivating a relationship in a quick manner? Absolutely. But when it comes to the art of developing relationships, that takes time. And let me tell you why. What's the root of every relationship? Trust. And people that don't believe me, I want you to try this. If you think that what I'm saying is baloney, this is the ultimate test. You utilize a piece of technology, you meet somebody. Let me tell you and prove to you that it takes more than 1 or 2 meetings through that initial connection to develop trust. After that second meeting with that person, I've done this. I've done this with prospecting clients. I've done this with just meetings that I've had and with current clients as well. I've looked at them and I said, do this. Say, hey, give me your social security number and give me your credit card. And if they say yes, then you've proven me wrong.
That's a little bit more crude of an analogy that I've got for you. My friend Chris really likes this saying when he's talking about building trust and building relationships. And he goes, you don't walk into a bar, walk up to the most attractive person that you see and say, you want to have sex right now? You say, exactly. What's your name? You say, can I buy you a drink? I want to know about who you are as a person. Let's maybe then at the end of the night, let's maybe hang out again another time. And then 3-4 times after that, maybe then you can ask that question, something like that, But you can't just walk in and cut straight to the chase. And I see so many companies doing that too. Just like, hey, you know what would be great is if you gave me all your money right now. That'd be really good for me.
That will work. It takes time.
Yeah, it doesn't. Well, so how does that specifically relate to kind of retention, which is an interesting, it's something that you kind of emphasize and retention, these are people that already have some degree of trust with you, and so you'd think it'd be like kind of a slam dunk, but like I see a lot of companies screwing that up too. So how does all this relate to retention? Like somebody that you have some kind of a relationship with?
Great question, Jeremy. And one thing before I answer that question, I would like to make one note about that last point that we were talking about developing a strategy, really understanding the audience, whether if it's employees or customers, really understanding how, to impact them and communicate to them effectively and build a sophisticated communication strategy around it. The story I always like to share is, I've been very, very lucky to have some amazing mentors in my life. And, I could do a whole podcast series of these amazing mentors that I've had throughout my career thus far. And one of our mentors, his name is Michael Malamatinas. And he actually is from Greece. He's one of my mentors, one of our mentors, Johnny and I's mentors from Greece. And he was the founder of Nike. In Nike Greece, so not Nike as a whole. This really relates to when creating communication and stuff like that, communication strategies, what we should be doing or what you should think about, if you will. Michael Malamatinas, we call him Coach. When he approached Nike saying, I want to create Nike in Greece, Nike gave him a laptop and said, good luck. They didn't think Greece was going to be successful. And not only was Greece successful, but he was able to position Nike in Greece as a more of a luxury brand, maybe not like a Prada or, a Versace, but, a level below that. Like when you wear Nike, it's like, oh, they're wearing Nike. It's not just an everyday brand. But even during the economic crisis in 2008, 2009, and people know how hard it hit Greece in the shoe business in a country like Greece, especially where Nike has more of that luxury brand, good luck. Like there's no way that you're going to stay in business. They grew more than they ever grew. They took things to the next level because they knew how to communicate. They knew how to communicate to their vendors. They knew how to communicate to their customers and were able to figure out what was most important for their customers, what was most important for their vendors, their resellers, in other words, and how are we going to craft a strategy that will allow us to grow. And he shared with me these two quotes that I tell everybody, that I've told my team, that I tell my strategic partners, that I'm telling everybody that's listening to this podcast. Some of us may have heard this. It's from the book Art of War by Sun Tzu. And he said two powerful quotes, and this is what my coach told me, and this is where many things changed for us, which is number one, tactics without a strategy is the noise before the defeat. Tactics without a strategy is the noise before the defeat. What that means is if we come in and let's do this and let's try this and let's deploy that and let's deploy this, we shoot all of these tactics. If we have no strategy, we're not going to see the result. But there's a flip side to it. And this is the second quote. is strategy without tactics is the slowest path to victory. Strategy without tactic is the slowest path to victory. You can have the best strategy, but you need to have the tactical execution plan to get to those results. So for that last point, before getting to the retention question that you asked, I want everybody to really, listen, hear those quotes, sit on them, marinate on them, because when you realize the power that those quotes have, it will really it will make you look at your business from a 30,000 foot view and say, all of us as businesses, we have powerful tactics. And I'm not saying that we don't have strategies. However, how powerful are those strategies? Are your tactics following a strategic plan, or is your tactical plan stronger than the overall strategy that you've put together? So just something I wanted to mention. And to answer your question about retention and how does this help, as far as, us taking time, spending time and whatnot. And I'm going to restate the question because I want to make sure that I understood it. So the question that you asked before I shared that story was, how do you utilize, taking time, relationships, communication to retain customers and employees? Was I right there, or did I miss something?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So basically, how do you take all of these like knowledge about relationships and trust and all of this and apply it towards a retention focus?
Absolutely. That's a fantastic question. So let's go ahead and kind of dig a little bit into the employee side, and we'll also dig a little bit into the customer side as well. So in the employee side, what we realize as employees, Jeremy, is that we're dedicating 40 to 50, sometimes 60 hours of our week to a company, to an organization. And the reason why when we build communication strategy plans, or when we coach our clients on how to build or how to create content that's relative to that communication strategy plan to retain employees, we do have to take time. We have to take time to understand our employees. We have to take time to understand why they're working for us, why they're doing what they're doing, why they're waking up, why they chose our company. And I feel like as companies, we sometimes get so busy that we forget the most valuable asset is to invest in our employees themselves, because without our employees, we wouldn't have a business. We wouldn't have a company. It's our employees that drive our products, our services, that drives the quality of those products and services, and we got to take care of them. And even though employees are quote unquote employees, they're people, and people matter.
And they're the most important asset that any business has.
Exactly. So retaining employees is we'll call it the business title. When we look at retaining employees, what we look at as VP Legacies is, are employees coming here because of job requirements or job fulfillment? Because there's a big difference there. If somebody's coming in for job requirements, I'm not saying that they're not doing a great job. They're probably doing a great job, but they're clocking in when they have to, and they're clocking out when they have to. When somebody finds job fulfillment, that's when you get powerful retention. That's when they're there for the long run. That's when they're there, that's when work isn't work, because they believe in where the company is going. They believe in the direction of the company. If you really want to retain employees and really engage your employees, and when we say engage, emotionally engage them, have them excited coming to work, it's being able to, number one, taking time to understand why they're there, why they chose your firm, what really motivates them, what really pushes them. One strategy that we use, and one question that we like to ask, we actually, really like what Tony Robbins said, which is, ask your employees, if they were to get $5,000 extra at the end of the year, they were just able to get $5,000 extra, ask them what they would do with it. Because what you're going to see there is, you're going to see them think and answer in a way in which the way that they would utilize the money that means something to them in a deeper emotional way, which we at VP Legacies, whatever that answer they give, that first answer, we call it an emotional indicator. What we mean by that is, it's the surface. If we keep asking why, we're going to get to the root of the reason of why they would utilize those funds in their own personal way, because there's an emotional reason to why they would do that. So if we start taking the time asking those questions, or questions like, if money didn't exist, what would you be doing? and really take time to understand that deeper personal level of our employees, then we can start crafting communication and connection with our employees in a way in which that'll get them more emotionally engaged. And I have several stories I can share of how we've done that, but I know for the sake of time, I won't have time to jump into them as well. And the last thing I'll say, just a few sentences on the customer and customer retention side as well. Customers as well, they don't just want, especially in today's world, they don't just want a product. They don't just want a service. What they want, Jeremy, what they really want is a company that they believe in, a company that they can identify with, a company they can stand proud next to. And when we talk about retaining customers, we're not talking about just the physical act of having them come to our shop or going online and purchasing something, but more importantly, them being raving fans of who you are, what you do, and what you sell, because it's not what you sell, it's what you stand for. Communicate what you stand for, communicate that emotional reason, and they will latch onto you because they believe in what you believe. Just like at VP Legacies. When you work with VP Legacies, you're not working with a communication company. You're working with a company that believes in creating a world where people aren't afraid to personally connect. You believe in a company that cares about people, that people matter. So it's not just the communication, like the Simon Sinek, why, how, what. The communication strategy, that's our what. But our why is that world we want to create. And people know when they work with us, they're working together because they want this world where relationships come first, where it's about trust, transparency, having great communication, and all of the above when it comes to developing authentic relationships.
That's incredible. I love that. So, just kind of thinking about this retention stuff and thinking about, making raving fans and things like that. What, and raving fan employees as well. What do you see people kind of doing right in the space, right? Like, what are they, what are people that you see out there in the world that are communicating this effectively, that are building this relationships and trust? How are they, effectively creating these raving fans, whether they're employees or customers? And then conversely, what do you see people doing wrong when they're trying to do it and failing?
Sure. Absolutely. So what are people doing right? I'll utilize a couple of examples that we know. Let's take Apple Computer, or now Apple. And the reason why I said Apple Computer and Apple is because Apple Computer dropped the computer for internal purposes. They didn't want to limit the thinking and open-mindedness of their employees. They didn't want it to limit Apple Computer as just a computer company, which is a big reason why they took computer out of their name. They did that for a huge employee engagement reasoning. Now, another reason why I say Apple is a great customer example. Since the inception, this goes back to 1984 when Apple really wanted to emotionally connect with their customers. And they've done this, basically since the beginning, is if we communicate our why, if we communicate the reason why we exist with our customers, and not that we're just another computer or tech company, that's when we're going to create raving fans, because people will come to us because they believe in what we believe. And that's what we saw Apple do. You take the 1984 extremely famous commercial. I can share all the details, but here are the highlights. The highlights were they were advertising the Macintosh, and it was a computer that did all sorts of amazing technical things. But guess what they decided to do? They decided not to advertise a product, but instead share a story. During that time, another famous thing that's known of 1984 is George Orwell and George Orwell's famous book, 1984. And it really talked about how, at the time, people were really worried that Big Brother or the government was going to control us, take over our mind, whatever you want to call it, through utilization of technology. So what Steve Jobs did, it's incredible if you hear the story. What he did that the board didn't know, what he decided to do is, let's create a story that talks about when you're with Apple, you are not buying a computer that's going to control you. You are going to have the power. You are going to be a great. You are going to define your life. And they did that through the 1984 Super Bowl commercial. And that is arguably the reason why Super Bowl commercials are what Super Bowl commercials are. It was the most successful Super Bowl commercial, I think, till this time, to the point where they sold, if I remember correctly, Jeremy, $300 million of product. But here's the funny thing. The product that ended up selling on that commercial ended up being a failed product. It failed. But it didn't matter. What mattered is that they connected with their customers. And you see their advertisements with Muhammad Ali and Martin Luther King and all of these influential people. They always connect with their customers saying, when you utilize Apple, you're not part of a computer company. You are becoming a great. You are challenging the status quo. We just allow you to do that through computers and other products that we sell. So that's a great example of a company that both for employee and for customer purposes, different strategies and ways to communicate different things that they have done.
No, I love that example. That's a great example. That's a wonderful one. So do you see anybody that's screwing it up really bad? Anybody, anything? Well, like not even anybody, just anything that you see people doing. I don't know. Like I think about your space and stuff like that. And obviously you're the expert, but like Nerf gun culture is what I call it, where it's like people are like, we're going to engage our employees and we're just going to give them Nerf guns. And it's like, they don't understand. Like you're not creating, the Nerf guns don't create a jovial culture. Like the Nerf guns come from a jovial culture. You know what I mean? Like,
exactly. Jeremy, you read my mind, and this is a really important thing to say as well. Is I want everybody to know you have your purpose, you have your why, you have the reason to why the company started and to why you're there. Or if you're the founder or the owner of the company, there's a reason why you started that company. Take that timepiece that I was telling you about, and really dig in and understand the emotional reason, the reason why you decided to go on your own, and why you have an amazing team of people, both employees and your customers, to why they come to you. Because what we see, Jeremy, going off of what you said, and we understand on one hand, is companies, they look at companies like Google and other very successful companies, and they're like, well, if we want to be successful like Google, we got to do what Google does. And then they put in the bean bags, they put in the kegs, they put in the ping pong tables, and it's not working. And they're like, but that's what Google does. Why isn't it working? It shouldn't that work? But it's Google. And what we want to tell everybody is that's Google's voice. You have your voice, and your voice is powerful. Your why is powerful, and you can create a movement. You can create an environment like a Google, like an Apple. So the big challenges that we see is we understand why people try to change their organizations, because they look at successful companies and they say they must be doing something right. So let's do what they're doing. Our millennials are leaving left and right, and all the millennials want to go to Google. The reason why Google exists is different from the reason why that you exist. And the reason why Google exists will create an environment that speaks to that why. And just like Google, if you want to really do what Google does, don't get the Nerf guns. Don't get the bean bags. Do what Google did, which is identify your why and create an environment and culture around it. And whether if that's bean bags, whether if that's a trampoline, whether if that's cubicles, whatever it is.
There's some pretty cool cubicles out there nowadays. I don't know if you've seen them all.
With glass and stuff.
Oh, yeah. They're glass. They got plants, all sorts of stuff. It's not like office space anymore. Well, that's cool, man. I really like that. And, I just want to say this has been incredibly eye-opening. Just like I have a lot of guests that come on and they talk great tactics and they talk about like all the here's how to hack whatever, like ad platform or something, right? And you come on and you're just all about the mindset and the strategy and the ways of thinking about things. And I absolutely love it. This has been eye-opening for me, truly. I really appreciate your time. All listeners out there, I know they're going to appreciate your time too. I want to give you an opportunity here. Pitch whatever you want. I've had charities, I've had, life experiences, I've had mostly businesses, but yeah, pitch whatever you like. I'm just here for a second.
Sure, absolutely. Well, one thing if it's all right, Jeremy, I'll definitely, dig a little bit more into just VP Legacies, kind of give, kind of a higher overview of who we are, what we do, and the pains and challenges that we like to tackle. The VP Legacies, it's kind of based on a new type of offering where, we work with our clients to build these high level communication strategies that's all about increasing their customer and employee retention. And we typically work with a couple of clients. The first type, they're the ones that are, hey, they're doing pretty good. They feel comfortable with their corporate communications. Their communications is effective, and they want to take things to the next level. They're always challenging themselves, but they just don't know how to take it to that next level. And the second type of client we work with, they're doing all right, but they're not as fortunate. They're anxious. Maybe it's a potential loss of profits is at stake, and they're trying to discover where the disconnect with their customers is happening. Maybe they're concerned. Trust and overall satisfaction of their employees has dipped, which is causing employee attrition to rise. Or they're struggling to communicate one unified message that gives their customers and employees certainty of the company's direction. So if anybody feels like they fit in one of those categories, or maybe you know of somebody that does, I always love to share coffee and share ideas. So that's a little higher overview of VP Legacies and some of more of the gain and pain points that we help solve.
If you're out there, if you're listening, if retention for your clients and your employees is number one in your mind right now, and it should be, think about Hector. Think about the wonderful work that he does. I've seen it. I love his work. Absolutely incredible person to work with. Hector, thank you so much again for being on.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. I really appreciate it. To all the listeners out there, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate all of you, and let's create an awesome world together.
Well, everybody, thanks for listening, and happy marketing.